Well, Jody Mack, I'm kind of where you are on this. I'm in a wait and see approach on Jalen Hurts. I know how I think this is going to go. I don't think he has the talent of Kyler Murray. I don't think he's a Lamar Jackson. And so if that proves to be the case during the course of the season, and I think we'll know even if they make the playoffs, we'll be able to tell, I think, based on how he plays against some of the better teams on the schedule. And there's not a lot of them because it's a good schedule for the Eagles, but I'm in wait and see mode, and I agree. You don't pay a guy like Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray money if he has another Hurts season like he did last year, or if he's only slightly better this year. But I think there's time. I think it's a good. What the Kyler Murray contract does is it does give you a barometer. It gives you a good idea of what the Eagles would be looking at, and it.
Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365, McMullen McDonald, and our bud John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation jumps aboard here with us on Birds 365. All right, John, I know you hopped on early. Thank you for that. So you heard me and McMullen going back and forth about the quarterback position in the NFL. Is this just a prelim, a 12-month prelim to when the Eagles move away from Jalen Hurts because he's just not good enough?
Well, Jody Mack, I'm kind of where you are on this. I'm in a wait and see approach on Jalen Hurts. I know how I think this is going to go. I don't think he has the talent of Kyler Murray. I don't think he's a Lamar Jackson. And so if that proves to be the case during the course of the season, and I think we'll know even if they make the playoffs, we'll be able to tell, I think, based on how he plays against some of the better teams on the schedule. And there's not a lot of them because it's a good schedule for the Eagles, but I'm in wait and see mode, and I agree. You don't pay a guy like Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray money if he has another Hurts season like he did last year, or if he's only slightly better this year. But I think there's time. I think it's a good. What the Kyler Murray contract does is it does give you a barometer. It gives you a good idea of what the Eagles would be looking at, and it will, I think, impact their decision whether or not to move forward with Jalen Hurts or to sign a veteran quarterback next offseason or get somebody in the draft. I'll tell you what, I'm not 100% convinced that if things don't work out with Jalen Hurts this offseason, that it's going to be a guy that they draft in the first round. When you look at the roster that they're putting together here in 2022, granted, there are a lot of guys on one-year deals, but you're putting together a roster that's meant to win both this year and in 23 and 24 and 25. Do you bring in a rookie quarterback, a first-round pick, who probably won't be ready to win on day one and sacrifice a season when you've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in his third year and whoever else you've got? Hassan Reddick is going to be, in the prime of his career. You only have Darius Slay for maybe another year or two of top level talent. Do you spend one of those years with a rookie quarterback who will be learning the NFL in his first season, even if it is a really talented one? I'm not sure you do that unless it's the very top guy or somebody, you can move up into the top five. And I don't know if we have the season I hope we think we're going to have, how high are these first round picks going to be? So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and to me, John, the bigger thing is as you mentioned, it's a barometer. So, when you start talking about the numbers, and they're just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because we all know how this works. And the next guy, Lamar Jackson's going to start at 231, and then Burrow's going to come up, and Herbert, and on we go. Mm-hmm. So, the salary cap's going to go up as well. So from a percentage standpoint, you can argue these guys are underpaid still rather than overpaid. But from a roster building standpoint, it becomes more difficult. And you talk about what the Eagles have been able to do, and I give Howie Roseman tremendous credit, is build up a pretty good roster from 2 to 53. I think we all look at it and say, wow, this is pretty deep. I know you just went through the Bleeding Green, you just went through the position groups and kind of ranked them. Pretty deep group overall when compared to other teams. Part of the reason for that is they don't have to pay Jalen Hurts. So when you look forward, ultimately you have to make a decision, right? The Eagles still have some time. We all know that. But it's the barometer that concerns me, because you got to be at the Kyler Murray level to get Kyler Murray money. I think the ceiling there is kind of limited. We know from a trade standpoint, that's probably not going to happen. So you start thinking, all right, well, where are the guys a little bit lower than that? And then you start looking at the 35 million guys. And that's where I brought up the Kirk Cousins of the world, the Jared Goffs of the world, the Carson Wentz's of the world. that's where you're at. That's what these guys are getting paid. And look, I think Cousins specifically, because to me, he's always been sort of a demarcation line. He's a good quarterback, but you're not going to win anything with him. He's going to put up numbers. And I think ultimately he's a little bit underrated. But what's the goal here? I hate it because I'm not a Sixers process guy. I hate the win or or lose mentality, Ricky Bobby mentality. I called it. If you're not first, you're last. Mm-hmm. I hate that thought process. But man, is that where pro sports are going? Like, if we can't win the championship, what is this about? That's my concern.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. I think there's something to be said for the process. And last year, I think we look back at last season, and we knew that team wasn't winning a Super Bowl, but everyone was heavily invested in getting to the playoffs because winning games is fun during the regular season. Getting ready for a playoff game is fun. And as the 49ers showed us last year, really, you never know what's going to happen once the tournament begins. And Jimmy Garoppolo came from a dropped interception away from getting them to the Super Bowl, and he's probably going to be on another team in another couple of weeks. And so, when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl in 2017, Carson Wentz was on his rookie deal. They were able to do that because, like you said, they invested in the rest of the team around him. Now, I'm not someone who believes that you shouldn't pay big money to a quarterback that's worth it so that you can pay the other guys. A quarterback is the most important position in any professional sport. And the Eagles need to make sure that they have identified who that's going to be at some point. Can they kind of struggle along like they did during the Buddy Ryan era and the Rich Kotite era and the Ray Rhodes era with some of these guys who they come in, they give you a year or two, you get to the first or second round of the playoffs, and then you're out. Are we okay with that as a fan base to kind of just roll along like that until we stumble into a Donovan McNabb or we stumble into a Carson Wentz at the height of his powers and gets you in deeper into the playoffs? And it's hard to know without a roadmap of knowing what veteran quarterbacks might be available next offseason. There could be a possibility that you have an offseason like this one where some big name quarterbacks are changing teams. And if you've got a roster that's built to win, maybe you can bring one of those guys on for a year or two. But what would be the best case scenario, obviously, for everyone is if Jalen Hurts plays really well this year. That would answer a lot of questions. If he's a Pro Bowl type quarterback and he shows you he's got a Lamar Jackson type skill set in there this year, then that answers the questions. But I'm leaning against that possibility, and I don't know where the Eagles go from here.
Yeah, see, here's where I have a tough time wrapping around my head around the stance John's taken today. I want to have at least an open mind about where the Eagles are going to next, if not Jalen Hurts. But that's where I'll make a strong step. I don't think they can get Bryce Young and or CJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be in position. They're going to win 10 games, so their first-round draft pick's not going to be high. I think New Orleans is going to be pretty good. I think they win a minimum of 8. Could win 9. So those two picks combined, not going to get you into the 1-2 slot in the draft. So who's it going to be?
Yeah.
I'm saying there's a drop-off after the first 2. Will Levis, Tanner McKee.
Well, I agree with that. Let me just throw in, and then I'll have John. The second part of my thing is, I agree. The Eagles, I said, Jalen Hurts is going to have a good year. He's not going to have a bad year. He's going to have a similar year to what he had last year. He's a good player. The Eagles are going to make the playoffs. I believe that. That's my prediction. He's going to do some really nice things. He might be a Pro Bowl alternate. Might even maybe be the third guy in the Pro Bowl for a realistic standpoint. That's my concern. And at that point, you start thinking, well, we got a good player here. Let's pay him $35 million. That's my concern. So the second part of my thought process is you keep rolling it over. You go to the college mentality. Say, I got a guy for 4 years. I got a guy for 5 years, maybe, if he's a first-round pick. But if he's not that superstar, I'm going to roll it over. I'm not paying a good player $35-40 million so I can't build the rest of my roster. Am I crazy, John Stolnis?
You're not crazy. You've got to really believe in the quarterback, and I think that's the key. We just don't know. There's so much we don't know, and the beautiful thing is we don't have to know just yet. We don't have to
No, you
make a
got
decision
4
just
years.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got some time with Jalen Hurts here, and if he is in the Pro Bowl, if he's one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the NFC, if he takes you to the NFC Championship game, then maybe you do pay him, because then he will have shown you that he can take you on an extended playoff run, that he can win a couple of playoff games, that he can beat a playoff caliber quarterback. Now that's assuming he doesn't stink in the playoffs and they win with defensive turnovers and whatnot. You just have to kind of, I think the eye test will be there. We'll be able to also look at some of the metrics that are out there and be able to see whether or not he's improved in these different areas with his accuracy, with throwing the ball over the middle, how he does with all of this talent around him that he has, because like we've been saying for weeks now, there's no excuse for Jalen Hurts not to play well this year if he has the ability. And I am in total wait and see mode. I'm not stressing about whether or not we pay him yet or what kind of decisions we make about it yet, because time is on our side right now.
Agreed. That's exactly the same way I look at John Stolnis here on Birds 365. All right, John, they're going to report on Tuesday, get workouts. They may actually even have a practice at some point.
Wow.
Because they haven't had one yet this year. If you don't go 11 on 11, it's not a practice to me.
Yeah.
The Eagles are in a good position in a lot of their starting spots, most significant playing time spots are decided. But there are a couple that have yet to be determined. How is Nick Sirianni going to go about deciding who gets those? And I don't want to leave his coordinators out of it. I certainly believe Gannon will dictate playing time on the defensive side of the ball, more so than on the offensive side of the ball. Are they going to have enough? Are those joint practices going to be the sole determinant of who is getting the time at the linebacker position for the Eagles? Out of the 3 safeties, veteran guys that they have, who's going to get more playing time? Are they going to be able to make that decision by the time game 1 rolls around?
I think that's going to go a long way. And I think a lot of those guys, we know the starters aren't going to play in the preseason games at all, but I think a lot of the guys who are in some of these positional battles for backup spots, backup tight end, the safety position, like you talked about a minute ago, some of the linebacker spots, they'll play in the preseason, and they're not going to play against other teams' top talent. But I think that'll give the coaching staff a good indication of who they want to go with, who they feel good about. And I got to believe that even if they're not in 11 on 11s, even if they're just doing 7 on 7s or they're doing stuff on the side, that they're seeing something there. They're seeing enough there to be able to make a judgment on these players. They're only hurting themselves if they don't. And so I'm hoping the coaching staff has some way of being able to analyze these guys and make an informed decision on them, even without everybody playing in the preseason games and full pads on doing 2-a-days throughout the course of the summer. They were very healthy last year. The Eagles were. Again, this is another one of those things I'm willing to wait and see about, whether or not the reduced practices, the reduced contact during the course of the summer will be good for the team in the long run, whether it will allow them to analyze who they have and make decisions on that. And I do think there will be some opportunities there. Without knowing exactly how they're going about making their decisions with regards to practices this summer. Another thing where we're kind of just going to have to wait and see.
John, I mentioned the roster a little bit earlier, and you did for your latest at bleedinggreennation.com, so people should check that out. Ranking the Eagles position groups heading into training camp. One thing stuck out to me, and that was the defensive line. Now, safety last, I think we all agree with that. That's the biggest concern. Then I think it was quarterbacks right between safeties. So I think John's a little bit closer to me and long-term about Jalen Hurts. But defensive line, I look at this defensive line and say, that's a pretty good group. Now, there's some concerns with age and Brandon Graham coming back, but it's deep, it's talented. I was surprised you had it as low as you did. What's your thought process on the defensive line?
Yeah, for me, I think it was, how much of is Hassan Reddick going to play as defensive end, and how much is he going to play at linebacker? And I think maybe it doesn't even really matter because he's probably going to move back and forth between those two things. So maybe we look at it. Maybe the best way to look at it is not defensive line and linebackers, but front seven or pass rushers or something like that. But as I was looking at positional groups, I was thinking of Reddick more as a linebacker as opposed to a defensive end. And if he's going to play mostly linebacker, you're looking at Brandon Graham on the outside, who again, I'm thrilled he's back, and he was a big surprise with how well he played in 2021. You hope he comes back, but I was expecting a little more out of Josh Sweat last year, to be perfectly honest. He disappeared in big games against good teams, and I don't think he's established himself as a week in, week out reliable pass rusher. I think you saw that from the numbers and the lack of sacks this team had last year. Derek Barnett is still going to get a regular amount of snaps at defensive end, which does not inspire a whole lot of confidence in me. And I think the edges are where I have most of the concern. I think at defensive tackle, adding Jordan Davis is hopefully going to really help in the run game. And I think there's a lot there as far as being able to rush the passer too. He just wasn't asked to do that all that much in college. Jivon Hargrave got off to a real fast start last year, but was quiet in the second half of the year and really did not match that production level. And we've seen that with him in his time in Philadelphia. He's kind of a streaky player in that regard. And I don't know what you've got in Fletcher Cox. Is he mostly cooked? But will a reduced role increase his effectiveness? If they don't need him to do as much, maybe he's a more effective player here in 2022. But I'm not sold on that idea. I think one of the big wild cards on the defensive line is Milton Williams. I liked what he was giving them at the end of the year. He seemed like he was an improving player. He's a flexible player, so you can play him at defensive tackle. You can play him on the edge a little bit. And so he's one guy that I do think could really add some, could help this positional group move up my rankings. But for me, this defensive line still has more question marks than they do answers. And that's why I ranked them as low as I did.
All right, since we've already gone right past the 2022 season where it comes to quarterback play.
It's only because of Kyler. I haven't gone past it, Jody.
Excuse me?
It's only because of the Kyler contract. I haven't gone past it.
Oh, okay. That sounds a lot like you already decided 2023.
I said they were going to make the playoffs.
Oh, okay. But who's their quarterback in 2023? It's the general manager mentality that we all have. We're always looking into the future. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Stolnis to do the same. Jivon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, 2023 defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles. One's back. Both are back. Neither is back. If one is back, which of the two?
I think if one is back, it's Hargrave. He's the younger player. I think there were a lot of us who expected Cox to not be on the team this year. I think we were all surprised that the Eagles went and re-signed him. So I think this is Cox's last go around, and I hope there's a time where we honor him at the end of the year because I can't imagine unless he has a renaissance this year and gets 6 or 7 sacks that he's back on this team. So I think if one of the two are back, it's probably Hargrave. And I think if Hargrave has a productive season, he can get his contract restructured if there's a salary cap issue. That's one of the things we know Howie Roseman is great at, kicking more money down the road. But it would not surprise me at all if both leave after the season, if they decide they want to just cut their losses and move forward and make Milton Williams a starter and have Davis as their other starter. I think it's they'd like to invest money in the defensive tackle position, but at some point you also do have to throw some of that money on the outside. And so there's going to be a lot of needs on this defensive line once the season is over. I just don't see Cox as being here any more than this season. And I'm not expecting a big renaissance season from Fletcher Cox. I hope that he's productive in the limited role that he's going to have. I guess, frankly, I hope it is a more limited role. I hope he's not overexposed because what we saw last year was a guy who just looked like he didn't have a whole lot left in the tank. So I would say Hargrave next year over Cox for sure.
Yeah, that $14 million is something that you would think that means the Eagles are going to play him a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see how the playing time is sort of divvied out up front by Jonathan Gannon, because you're going to see a lot of odd and even man fronts. You're going to see a lot of multiple looks. You're going to see 5-man fronts, 4-man fronts, 3-man fronts. So it's going to be interesting to see how that playing time is sort of divvied out.
Yeah.
September 11th, because Jody's scolding me about going past this season. So I'm going to go to this season, John. September 11th in Detroit. Is Jalen Reagor on the field?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll say at this point he is. I think they're going to give him another shot as the punt returner. I think they would be silly to have him as one of their top 5 wideouts. I would take Greg Ward over him right now as the number 5, just for the reliability. I think Jalen Reagor last year really struggled as a punt returner. He was a net negative back there trying to field punts. If he can be better, if he can show this summer that he is better back there fielding punts, making decisions, and actually trying to, get the ball upfield. The Eagles were awful at that last year in special teams. They had one of the worst special teams units in football last season. So Rager's got to show that he can field punts, and he's probably going to have to be on punt coverage teams and get down the field and make a tackle or two here and there during the course of the season. I think Howie Roseman desperately wants to keep him on the roster and find a way for him to be productive. If he doesn't have to worry about as much with taking care of the wide receiver stuff, the weight of expectations of being the number 2 wide receiver, if he can focus a lot more of that energy on punt returns, on playing special teams, then maybe he becomes like a Desmond Howard type player for you, where he can.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
It would be really nice, and we know what kind of a weapon that is when you have somebody back there who can break a game, who can shift field position like that with one return. So that's the hope. It's not a high hope, but I think at this point he's probably the best option for you back there, because they didn't go out this offseason and get somebody that has a track record of doing that.
Now, Britton Kobe, real quick, Jody, just one follow-up with John about Reagor, because, and I've said this as well, I think we've all said it. GMs don't want to give up on first-round picks in theory. But is it worse if Jalen's on the field as the 6th receiver and the punt returner for Howie Roseman, and he's covering kicks? Isn't that more of in other words, isn't that more of a microscope on, boy, he really missed out on this kid? Wouldn't it just be better to cut bait, give him a change of scenery for both sides if you're the GM?
I think there's a lot to say there. I can see that. I mean, if you're looking at what's best for Reagor, it certainly would be better for him to go someplace else. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that there's a lot of coaching staffs around the league that are looking at him and thinking there's a diamond in the rough. There might be. And if there's a trade out there to be made, the Eagles should make it. I'll say that. I think if there's a way you can get, a 5th rounder, 6th rounder for Jalen Reagor and let him go try someplace else, I think that's fine. And if you do find somebody during the course of training camp that can return punts, then I say, let him go, release him, and let him try and latch on with another team. I think Howie Roseman's a little stubborn when it comes to a guy like Jalen Reagor, and without being able to get an asset in return, I don't think he's just going to cut him for the sake of cutting him.
All right, John, if I get you in trouble for this ahead of time, I'll apologize. But as you can see here on Birds 365, 2 hosts don't always necessarily have to agree. Your buddy, Brendan Lee Gowton, came out with his all-defensive team in the NFC East. Mm-hmm. Some interesting selections. Some Eagles on there, some guys from the 3 other teams. His top 2 linebackers were, to no one's surprise, Michael Parsons, who is all-world with his rookie year with the Dallas Cowboys last year, and Kaiser White as the 2nd-best linebacker in the NFC East this year. I don't think he's the 2nd-best linebacker on the Philadelphia Eagles. I would rank him 3rd on the Eagles behind Nakobe Dean and TJ Edwards. BLG's got him the 2nd-best linebacker in the division. Yeah. Are you near as high on Kaiser White as your buddy BLG is?
I think he's the 2nd-best linebacker on the team. Not in the division? No, I mean, I think, again.
Are you putting Nakobe Dean 3rd?
Yes, because I need to see it. I need to see it.
You guys are going to eat so much crow on that one.
I would love it. And you know what? It'll taste good.
I can eat crow, yeah.
It'll taste good.
If Jalen Hurts is a first-team All-Pro, I'll happily eat crow and say I was wrong.
I mean, I think it was a steal getting him in the third round, but I think we also, too, need to be careful about knowing that we got a second round pick or even a late first round pick in the third round, not making him to be better in his rookie season than I think we have a right to expect him to be. Do we know how much he's going to start, how much playing time he's going to get? Because if Reddick is going to be at one spot on the outside and White's going to be at the other side, you're going to have TJ Edwards playing a lot because they love him and his ability to play the middle. If they're playing 3-4, then sure, you're going to probably see a lot of him. But if you're playing 4-3 a lot of the time, he might not be getting more than 30 to 40% of the defensive snaps this season. So I think the future is really bright for him. As far as 2022 goes, I don't think I can put him ahead of Reddick and ahead of White, who are established guys. We know Reddick's going to play a ton, and I think White's going to play a ton because of his ability to cover guys. And so Nakobe Dean, love him, love his future, think it's great, but I'm pumping the brake a little bit on him in 2022, just until we can get a little bit more of a look at him.
Yeah, plus we got to see if he's healthy because the Eagles say he's healthy, but they didn't do anything in the spring. So we got to see, I'm going to feel a lot better about Nakobe Dean if we finally get to training camp, really day 5 of training camp. They have such a long ramp-up period now. And he's out there in 11 on 11s, and he's completely healthy, and he's ready to go. Otherwise, maybe it's a second half of the season type thing. Maybe he works his way in a little bit more slowly. It's not that I don't think he's going to be a good player. I think he's just going to have, as Jody knows, the startup cost. I like that term, like most rookies have. And that's not a bad thing. That's not an insult to a young third-round pick. And the good news is the Eagles have more depth at linebacker than they've had in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I'll even throw Davion Taylor in there because he can't stay healthy, but the Eagles like him. And he's very athletic. He's very physical. When he was out there, he seemed to start to be getting it as a raw prospect. When is the last time you've seen the Eagles have options at linebacker?
Yeah,
John.
It's really great. I mean, I think you might have to go back to the 2002, 3, 4 era where you had Trotter and you had Ike and you had oh gosh, I'm blanking on a couple of these guys now, but you had a good group there. And you go back to the Buddy Ryan days when you had Byron Evans and you had Seth Joyner and those guys. I mean, that's to me, that's when I think about the halcyon days of Eagles linebackers. That's what I go back to. I go back to that group where, create the way they would blitz the quarterback, but be able to make plays in the middle of the field and get turnovers and scare the living daylights out of people. I think this unit has a chance to be as good as some of those Buddy Ryan linebacker units. And I love linebackers. I think it's my favorite position on the field on defense because you can do so much. You can blitz, you can play back. They make a ton of tackles. I think the Eagles have underrated the importance of linebackers and overrated how much importance the defensive line is supposed to have. I think it's swayed too much in one direction and over the other. And I'm glad there's now, it seems to be a little bit more of a balance right now. I think the linebacker group is much better than the defensive line group.
All right. With the risk of repeating myself, and that's pretty much exactly what I'm going to do. Your buddy BLG ranked the top 2 safeties in the NFC East. And he had Xavier McKinney of the Giants, number 1, and he really did have a pretty good year last year, and I think is only going to get better. So I like that selection. And his second safety is Jaquiski Tartt of the Philadelphia Eagles. Much like at linebacker, I don't think he's the second best safety on the Eagles, let alone the second best safety in the NFC East. Are you on the Jaquiski Tartt bandwagon?
It was an interesting pickup. I'm not. I think he's got a chance to start for this team. I mean, I think there's a reason they've been talking up Marcus Epps all offseason, and then they go out and they sign Tartt. So I think he's a good player. I think he'll be a good player for this team. I think sometimes when there's a new guy, we can get overly excited about a new guy and pump him up a little bit more than maybe is worthy. I mean, Anthony Harris right now I would have over Tartt for sure. I certainly think Tartt's better than way better than Kevon Wallace. So I'm really disappointed in him as a player. I thought he was going to be good when they drafted him. do we even know that Tartt's going to start over Epps at this point? I mean,
No,
I think that's one of the training camp battles.
If I'm a betting man, I'm betting on if Jaquiski Tartt does start, it will be for Anthony Harris. It will not be for Marcus Epps. I think the Eagles want to get Marcus Epps on the field. They want to get some youth and some. Now he might crap the bed in training camp and these joint practices, and that could change. But I think that's the plan to get some youth out there because Marcus can at least run and he can do some things. And he proved to be somewhat of a playmaker. And we'll see if 45% of the snaps can turn into 95% of the snaps and he can hold up. I think that's the hope. But also, John, you have to realize they tried to sign Marcus Williams.
Right.
And so I guess I'll leave it there with you and follow John at John Stolnis on Twitter. You can read him at Bleeding Green Nation. Read him at The Good Fight for your Phillies news as they make a run towards the playoffs. When it comes to Jesse Bates, there's a lot of talk. The Eagles don't have the room for him right now. But a lot of fans, you know how fans are. They want to give everything they don't like to Cincinnati for everything they do like. So they want to send Andre Dillard and Rager and Barnett.
It's a package. It's a package deal. Everybody loves a good package deal.
Yeah.
I'll put Jaquiski Tartt in, despite the fact that Brandon Lee Gowton's got him second best safety in the NFC East.
That's right.
Any chance Jesse Bates in Philadelphia?
I think you laid out the reasons why the chances are probably better not that he would come to Philadelphia than they are that he would come to Philadelphia. Everybody looks at Howie Roseman loving to make trades and thinking, oh, okay, well, he loves to make trades, loves to make a splash. And that's all true. He does love to do that. But I do think they went out and they got Tartt for a reason. And I think that I don't think that they feel like they have to spend big money in every single position group. And so I think they look at their trio of cornerbacks and they feel good about the coverage that they're going to get from those guys. And so they maybe don't need to go out and get Jesse Bates. I don't really feel a pressing need to go out and get him. I would like to see what Tartt and Epps have to do. If they get him, great. You've got to make some room on the roster, and I think they need to clear some cap room too, if I'm not mistaken. So they'd have to make a couple of they'd have to subtract from someplace in order to make that happen. And Andre Dillard has some value, so maybe you can move him and clear some space there. I don't know how much space you get. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's probably a move to be made there. But you're right. You're not trading a bunch of your flotsam to the Bengals in order to bring in a guy who, is on the franchise tag. And then you got to sign him long term. Yeah. And so,
which you can't do, by the way. You can't do until next year. So,
right. So I don't see it. I'll be happy if it happens, but I think the odds are better than not. It doesn't.
All right, John, last one from me, and you should check out John's podcast, Eye on the Enemy. You Bird fans out there will enjoy it greatly. All right. We're going to have you on again before the season starts, so I might have to repeat this question, but I'm going to ask it today anyway.
All right.
Week 1 at the Detroit Lions. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, and I like the Lions this year. I think they're going to be improved. I think it's a good place for them to start, though. I think it might take a little while for the Lions to kind of get their feet under them to kind of, know what they have. I mean, I think it could be a situation. Jared Goff is still the starter there, right? I mean, So I think that could be a good opening week for the Eagles defense to pin their ears back and go after a guy who has slipped big time since that Super Bowl season. And I think it might take the Lions just a little bit of time to find themselves. So for me, I think that's a good spot for them. I would rather them go in there than say start off the season in Tampa or start off the season even in Dallas or something like that. Against a Detroit team that I think will be improved, but not one of the upper echelon teams in the NFC.
Johnny, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on. And did your phone ring with BLG getting on your case?
No, we'll talk. We'll talk in the Slack channel a little later, I'm sure.
I put you in a tough spot.
By the way, did Landon Collins get signed? I didn't even know Landon Collins was signed. BLG had Landon Collins as the honorable mention at safety. I thought he was out. I thought he was a free agent. I could be wrong.
I think isn't he still a free agent? Yeah, I don't think he's signed.
I think so. Yell at BLG for that too.
Yeah,
feel
free to give him a hard time.
Yeah, you bet.
Johnny, good stuff. Thanks, buddy, and we will get you back on a couple weeks down the road.
You bet. Always a pleasure, guys.
Thanks, John.
John.